Transporting the critically injured to hospital in the quickest possible time, the Westpac Rescue Helicopter Service has helped thousands since its humble beginnings in 1975.
Well, we started off in a very, very modest way with a Bell 47 old Bell Bubble helicopter.
These days, there's 3 helicopters operating out of Newcastle alone. It can cost up to $3,500 an hour to run the aircraft, yet business and community sponsorship means the service remains free for patients. As a means of recording its 30-year history and thanking those who have ensured it has a future, the service has released a 44-page book.
And we wanted those in the community, both the people that help us and those that have had any association, and the general public, of course, to have a better understanding of what we are and what we do.
The launch of the book is timely, given it's Helicopter Awareness Week, and the Newcastle branch will be throwing open its doors to the public from 9:30 tomorrow morning. Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
From now till early August, 6,500 humpback whales will pass by our coastline on their annual northern migration from the chills of Antarctica to Australia's tropical north. For those who ventured out to see the gentle giants today, the thought of Japan killing these endangered humpbacks in Antarctic waters is almost incomprehensible.
I think it's disgusting. I think everybody should do everything in their power to stop the Japanese doing what they want to do. It's just not right.
Makes you very angry that to think that Japan are going to kill the whales.
I think everybody's fallen in love with them. We want them to stay. We don't like the idea that some foreign countries are going to start harvesting our whales. You know, we do look upon them a bit as our whales because they are the population that runs up and down the east coast.
Thousands of signatures from Australia will help our government lobby against commercial whaling at the International Whaling Commission held in 2 weeks' time in Korea. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The Curry Masonic Village has doubled its capacity, opening its new wing today, taking the total number of beds at the facility to 91. Not as long as waiting lists though. For this complex alone, up to 100 of the Curry District's elderly are on standby.
Some of those people will be on other waiting lists as well. Most of those people will never get into this facility.
Requiring a high level of care, Connie Boris moved in on Tuesday. She secured a bed in 7 months, much to the relief of family after being told they might have to wait up to a year.
We were prepared to wait that long, so we're not complaining about having to wait. We were lucky to get such a nice place.
A place worth $7 million. Every resident has their private space, even couples are catered for with doors joining some neighbouring rooms. It's one of 2 investments in the Hunter by the Royal Freemasons Benevolent Institution. The charity is also funding a $9 million upgrade of its other aged care facility at Edgeworth. Adam McIlrick, NBN News. It's in this big shed on the Newcastle University campus where contaminated groundwater from Hydro Aluminium's Curry site will be treated.
We're looking at meeting EPA guidelines for discharge into sewer.
It's part of a trial program funded largely by Hydro Aluminium.
Once that is proven to be successful, then we'll do the whole thing on site.
Let's say this blue tank is the contaminated groundwater site at Curry. Then, by natural process, the groundwater, loaded with fluoride and cyanide as a result of heavy industry, flows through gravel, sand and calcium.
Effectively, we dig a trench, put this material in. The groundwater does its own work and it filters through this barrier, and when it comes out the other side, it's nice and clean.
To make sure the process is effective in the testing stage, a series of checks are in place which measure the groundwater at any given time through the treatment. The trial will begin next month when contaminated groundwater from Hydro starts to arrive at the Unilab. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
Lynn Smith is living proof that cancer can be beaten. She says a cancer diagnosis no longer translates into a death sentence. People with cancer are living longer than ever before thanks to early detection and better treatments.
So I was diagnosed in July 1999 with a cancer of unknown primary, a squamous cell carcinoma, which is a reasonably dicey one.
Despite that original prognosis, the Central Coast cancer survivor will soon reach a major milestone.
I'm fortunate that, next month I'll celebrate 6 years of survivorship, of which I'm very proud.
Lynn battled through the treatment without a support network, prompting her to establish a support group in 2001 to help carers, patients and survivors cope.
At the time there was no support service or support group like ours on the Central Coast. I basically relied on my husband and my son and daughter and granddaughter to pull me through it.
While things have changed since then, it's life experiences like these that the Cancer Institute of New South Wales wants to hear about. Lynn joined other cancer survivors in Newcastle today as part of a consultation series being held across the state. The aim to help the Cancer Institute plan for the future and ensure services, funding and support groups are adequate in each region. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Chad Bennett's fight nights typically start early, but his most recent battle to make the weight for tonight is sure to be won before the required time after he tipped the scales a fraction over last night. His Thai opponent's name may be a mouthful to pronounce, but it's his southpaw style that will provide a real handful for the homegrown Bennett. He has big plans past this bout, with a stint in the US on the cards. The Newcastle Harness Racing Club's Triple Treat starts tomorrow night with the Newcastle Oaks. It's the first leg of 3 feature races over the next 3 weekends for, you guessed it, 3-year-olds. And one of the best going around at the moment is White Thunder. The filly has the impressive record of 10 wins from 10 starts, with earnings already well past $200,000. The Oaks will be followed by the Guineas and Derby in upcoming weekends. With representative players away at the Country Championship final tomorrow, it leaves an open round in Newcastle Rugby League. Sunday's clash between West and Wyong sure to be a highlight. The Waratahs welcome back former Australian Sevens player Dan Peterson from a stint in Rugby League when they take on the Wanderers in Newcastle Hunter Rugby's match of the round. While in NBN Soccer League's big game is also on Sunday, with the unbeaten Broadmeadow to play the Edgeworth Eagles in the top of the table clash.
The physical capacity of the modern-day footballer is as impressive as any elite athlete. This aspect was proudly on display in the game's toughest arena during Origin 1. But what really caught my eye is how these durable individuals have reached a new level in their performance when they back up for club football as soon as 48 hours later. Now, this is nothing new. Players have been backing up from Origin for 25 years, however, a little bit lacklustre and mistake and injury prone. But the new age of fitness and the recovery systems in place mean that players today are not just backing up, they are playing at man-of-the-match levels again. Matt Bowen played the most dominant individual game I've seen him play in years as the Cowboys defeated the Bulldogs 48 hours after Origin. It really was a sheer brilliant performance by him. He ran loops around a bedazzled Bulldogs outfit. Now, Ben Kennedy and Anthony Watmore both played 80 minutes as the Seagulls had an amazing comeback win against the Panthers, 36 points to 26. Likewise, Billy Slater, Matt King and Cameron Smith were acknowledged as the match winners as the Storm held on to a steely win against the Dragons, who themselves had players backing up with the likes of Jason Riles, who made 24 tackles, 19 hit-ups. His front row partner Luke Bailey, 29 tackles, 17 hit-ups. Now, these are just a few examples of the game's elite players who over the weekend really pushed themselves. They face the same scenario 2 more times in the next 2 months in Origin 2 and Origin 3, and they'll do it all again. Let's have a look at round 13's tips. I'm going for the Roosters tonight. 3 games on Saturday. I like the Cowboys, Bulldogs and the Dragons to win. On Sunday, it's the Knights who'll take on the competition leaders, the Broncos. I also like the Storm and the Panthers to win their games. Have a great weekend. See you next week.
It's that time of year where players carry the odd bump or bruise without question, but illness is something you can't really control. A win tonight would cure almost any ailment, but getting a fit starting 7 for the Hunter Jaegers was proving hard enough at this morning's final session, with Lara Wellham battling an upset stomach. The threat of losing 3 straight worries them all as well, and while last week's strong performance gave them confidence, close isn't nearly good enough.
Of course you're not happy with that. You want to get a win and capitalise on good performances like that. So obviously if we play like we did last week, we'd certainly like to get a win tonight.
A lot will rest on Menzies and her fellow defenders against the speed of the Thunderbirds mid-court, which masterminds the best attack in the league. Kimberly Gilmore is finding it hard enough just to get game time, but would love the chance to help shut down the Adelaide side.
Very fast, which is good for them, but not so good for us. But we've just got to work as a unit, which is something we've worked on and is developing as well.
Play starts in just under an hour. It's a build-up that's taking shape of almost Origin-like proportions, and for many nights, Sunday's match will be the closest thing to it. The Newcastle players who have donned a blue jersey featured at a lunch today honouring the state versus state concept, knowing full well what to expect from their star-studded opponents on Sunday.
Players mightn't get to play State of Origin, but you can say you've come up against a Brad Thorne or a Petro or Shane Webke, so it's a big opportunity for these young blokes coming through to shine.
Just having Andrew Johns back at training has lifted Newcastle, and the state rate can't wait to team up with him once again. But few players will benefit more from his return than Jared Mullen. The teenage 5'8", a late call-up to replace the injured Kurt Gidley.
I've got Jared, and he'll remember this game for a long time, first game with Joey.
He got a ringing endorsement today too from Steve Simpson, who's out for a big game for his own reasons. With the team for Origin 2 announced on Monday, it'll be a thought, but not the driving factor for him against Brisbane.
I've got to go and concentrate on that. If I sort of think about other things, you lose focus on what you've got to do out there. So I'm just going to concentrate on my game.
Like Daniel walking into the Lions' den, it couldn't have been easy for Sing Samut Wasampan, facing a Newcastle crowd faithful to Hollywood Bennett. Nevertheless, he was made to feel welcome. And with pleasantries exchanged, the southpaw and hometown hero got on with the business of boxing. The Thai contender had trouble landing his shots, but did manage a sneaky left in the second round. Chad Bennett responded though, this uppercut sending Sing Samut a warning for what was to come. Down for the count, the visiting contender scrambled to his feet, but the referee ruled this fight was over. Bennett winning by knockout in the third round, retaining his IBF welterweight Pan-Pacific title.
For children growing up on the dusty, dry plains of central western New South Wales, the well-groomed field at Newcastle's Energy Australia Stadium is one of the greenest paddocks they're likely to see. To escape the drought for a few days, little Trent Tulloch and his family from Yagara near Orange have been shouted some respite in Newcastle. Trent, who lives with a rare muscle-wasting disease, is the first of about 50 children who'll visit the city to meet their footy heroes and take their minds off problems at home.
Some of the kids have seen rain twice in their lives, which is quite unusual because here in Newcastle we've just had so much rain. So it's a great experience for them.
Oh, very dry. There's been no rain and yeah, it's very bad. Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen out there, like if we don't get a bit of rain soon.
A fair bit. All the farms are dried up.
Trent and his brother Corey met their favourite players today and will watch the big game tomorrow, courtesy of the Knights, the Police Citizens Youth Club, Hunter Sports High, Club Charlestown and other local businesses.
It's the most popular sport in these country towns and they travel absolutely huge distances to play the most minor of games, and it's all credit to them. And I think it's one of our responsibilities is to make sure the game survives in the bush, and if this is one way we can do that, then that's a wonderful thing.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
His parents had given up on him, he'd been thrown out of school and was constantly in trouble with the law. For 15-year-old Joel Nelson, the future didn't look bright.
Well, I wasn't a very good kid. I was stealing people's cars and breaking into people's houses, and I never really liked doing that, but now I've got to change my life around.
After 18 months with the Lake Macquarie PCYC, they found him full-time employment. And it's not just any old job, it's the ultimate for Joel, one that many young boys would give an arm and a leg to do. He's working alongside top surfboard shapers at Newcastle's Pacific Dreams. His sights set on learning the trade and on making a career of it.
I've rang his parents each day and see how he's going, and his parents are so happy, and they're just ecstatic that they've got their proper son back again, and it's just going really well.
Last weekend I come to work on a Saturday because I didn't have to, but I just done it anyway.
And with that sort of newfound enthusiasm, it's clear this young man is keen to make the most of this rare opportunity and will be forever grateful to the PCYC.
I would probably be in jail if it wasn't for them, and they got me into this job, and I'm real thankful for that.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Senior players were told late today that Mark Sargent was to leave, but as this latest off-field drama continued to unfold, the side was addressing plenty of their own.
With David Siege being wounded for probably 4 to 8 weeks, and probably Matt Gidley would be, I think, unlikely to play at this stage, and of course Danny Badiris and Steve Simpson not here.
Injury and origin have combined to rob the side of at least 4 players from last weekend's team, but it has opened the door for winger Craig Hall to make his return after 10 weeks out with knee problems.
I just got to manage it a little bit better. I'm rehab today and then back on the park on Wednesday, so I just got to be smart about how I approach it.
The reshuffle sees Milton Thaiday at fullback while Brad Ty is on standby for Matthew Gidley, who is considered at long odds to play with a groin problem. Todd Lowry comes into lock while Luke Quigley steps up to cover for state rake Denny Badiris. Today's drama, though, overshadowed somewhat the resignation of former chairman Michael Hill from the board. While the latest drama had nothing to do with his decision that he'd made some time ago, the Life member thought it best to move on.
The Pasminco lead and zinc smelter may have closed in 2003, but it's left a lasting legacy on the environment and the health of those living near it. For years, the Area Health Service has been testing the levels of lead in children living in Bullaroo, Argenton and Spears Point. But this year, results will be even more eagerly anticipated.
The last test a year ago was a little too close to the closure of the smelter. There hadn't been enough time for blood leads to drop if they were going to drop.
Michelle McKinnon has had 3-year-old Bradley's blood tested since he was a baby, and with lead staying in the system for months or even years, regular checkups are vital.
I feel happier knowing what they are, and if they do raise at any time, we can keep them under control. And I'm just more content knowing the area is still being monitored and he's still being tested.
Blood lead testing will be conducted at the Environmental Health Centre in Bullaroo daily until June 17, with all participants receiving a special thank you gift. Results are expected in July. Jessica Phillis, NBN News. It's a case of East versus West when it comes to Maitland's third river crossing. There's widespread community support for one option, which travels to the west of Maitland, but the state government's preference is an eastern route.
We prefer the western river crossing, that's WR1 as described by the RTA, because it doesn't have the flood problems, the traffic congestion problems or the road safety problems of the eastern route.
Well, Council has on 2 occasions resolved that it will support the western option.
Maitland's 2 Hunter River crossings are heavily congested, so a third bridge is vital. But residents don't want the $30 million project to destroy fertile farmland between East Maitland and Bulwarra Heights, a point the government has been downplaying.
Prized agricultural land in Australia is very rare, and this is the very best agricultural land in Australia. So I don't think it's 4.1 hectares, I think it's probably more like 35 to 40 hectares will be lost by the eastern route.
And there are flooding concerns with the eastern route to be built across a floodway.
If they have to build it up to go from the smaller levee to the higher levee, it will have a damming effect and this will harm the farms.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Today it was business as usual, with Knights coach Michael Hagan and club CEO Ken Conway showing a united front. It was a little different last night when Hagan and football manager Mark Sargent were called before a special sitting of the board in relation to a weekend newspaper article.
I won't use the expression reprimanded. Let's say that it was made abundantly clear that we believe there were better ways to handle the situation.
It was clearly a heated winter's night, but one which some vowed to work through.
I don't have a problem working with anyone that the board wants me to work with.
Late today, though, Mark Sargent made it clear he wasn't, And in another dramatic chapter to this club's season, he offered his resignation effective Friday. The latest chain of events was sparked when both Sargent and Hagan questioned the club's lack of resources in contrast to other clubs. While Sargent has left, the problems remain, and if they don't improve next season, there are fears the coach could follow suit.
There's just some things that we'd like to see improved upon, mate, so and I know we're operating in a difficult situation, but I don't think it would hopefully come to that.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Sometimes it pays to have friends in high places. Trudy Musgrave is lucky enough to be associated with the owner of one of very few grass tennis courts in Newcastle, a good thing when you're coming off a 5-week break and preparing for a tournament like Wimbledon.
Well, I think it's probably the best preparation I've ever had going into Wimbledon, because normally I'm playing in the French Open on the clay this time of the year, so I've actually had 2 or 3 weeks on the grass ahead of all the other girls.
And after major knee surgery and a back injury kept her off the court earlier this year, Musgrave has plenty of catching up to do. She'll be playing doubles with one-time opponent Akiko Morigami at the Grand Slam. Mixed doubles is a possibility too.
I'm hoping to. I haven't spoken with Wayne Arthurs yet, who I play with at the Australian Open, but I'm going to catch up with him when we're in Netherlands, and hopefully he'll help me out and play with me again.
Another Novocastrian seasoned on the world stage is Olympian Josh Ross. Today it was confirmed he'll headline the Australian athletics team to contest the World Championships during August, along with the likes of rival Patrick Johnson. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
I've won 2 contests this year, so I'm pretty happy. I don't know how I couldn't have a smile on my face.
One thing is certain, it would have been an agonising decision for Mark Sargent to walk away from the Knights. One of the club's foundation players, Sargent won a Rothmans medal in 1989, shortly before the uncompromising prop became the Knights' first Kangaroo rep. For the last 5 years, he's been Newcastle's football manager. He resigned from that position late yesterday, stating that his opinion regarding the future direction of the club was at odds with senior management, making his employment untenable. Today, Knights chairman Michael Tyler said Sargent's disagreement was with CEO Ken Conway.
Professionally, there's a difference of opinion between himself and our chief executive.
The conflict reached a climax when Sargent and coach Michael Hagan were brought before the Knights board on Monday night over comments they made questioning the club's resources. The chairman says the club's financial problems underpin the lack of resources, a situation the Knights hope to fix if they can strike a partnership with the Western Suburbs Leagues club.
But they're not just going to throw a bucket full of dollars at us. So we've got to provide all the facts and figures to make sure that it's a worthwhile investment for them.
Meantime, the Knights are confident Sargent's ally and former teammate Michael Hagan won't follow suit. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
You don't have to look far to see Newcastle changing. The guidelines for the next phase of that evolution are expected soon when a 30-year planning framework for the Lower Hunter is released by the state government. The Hunter Property Council today spelled out how it sees our future, releasing a discussion paper being sent to all three tiers of government that it now wants the region to support.
Absolutely. We're very much trying to corral a sense of the community and the whole region moving in the same direction.
That future includes the Newcastle CBD remaining as the regional capital. The harbour and the proposed multi-purpose shipping terminal, coupled with ongoing development of the aviation industry at Newcastle Airport, are identified as catalyst infrastructure for key transport industries when they're no longer able to be accommodated in Sydney. Our population by 2026 would be 770,000, with workers the prime target for that growth.
The high population target, we believe, is achievable if we get growth with development. We don't believe people are going to move to this region or come into this region or stay in this region if there aren't any jobs.
And the Property Council has warned all three levels of government that our future growth potential won't be fully realised unless it builds its share of infrastructure. Gary Blair, NBN News.
That if Council is going to support it, they'd like that done sooner rather than later, but they've certainly not issued any ultimatums or deadlines and continue to work with us very patiently.
The security shake-up is likely to lead to tighter controls on staff at regional airports. Managers at the Newcastle terminal say they're currently meeting all security guidelines relating to staff, but say they've allowed for extra measures as part of their current expansion. While down on the harbour, the Newcastle Port Corporation isn't so open about its measures and says security is a federal government matter. News that all port workers could be re-screened for criminal records has the Maritime Union up in arms. It says any threat isn't likely to come from home.
If it wasn't so serious, it'd be a joke. We've got the absurd situation now where the federal government policy is to attract foreign flag vessels with foreign seafarers who are unscreened coming into this country, and at the same time then suggesting that as a security measure, we screen Australian workers. We think it's absurd.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Surgeons describe an angiogram as a roadmap of the arteries. So you could say this is the best satellite navigation equipment on the market. The $2.5 million interventional angiography suite at Newcastle Private Hospital uses state-of-the-art technology, and its flat panel monitors deliver more than just clearer resolution.
You tend to use less contrast. You tend to also have to give less radiation to the patients for the amount of resolution that you need.
Newcastle Private's proximity to the John Hunter, a major teaching hospital, means the experiences of surgeons using the suite may end up benefiting the public sector as well.
Most of us have found that it's a good idea to have a private and a public hospital working hand in hand. And it's always good to share the knowledge and the expertise across two different domains.
The suite, which is used daily, could treat 600 people with heart or vascular problems annually. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Boom 3-year-old Vitesse Dane squeezed off the rail and powered home for an emphatic victory in the Queensland Oaks on Saturday. It was a Group 1 win for Chris Lees and also a race his late father Max didn't win during his stellar career.
Yeah, it's a prestigious race at Queensland Oaks, so it's a great thrill to win it.
That determined win has Lees confident Vitesse Dane can stand up in the Group 1 Queensland Derby this Saturday. It's once again at Eagle Farm and over the same distance.
Well, she's got to back up, but she's given the indication through the week that she should handle it. She's done very well in the stable and she's on track, I think.
The other big news from the Lees stable surrounds County Tyrone. The consistent stayer is in Queensland for Monday's 3200-metre Brisbane Cup. It's a distance he's never won over, but champion jockey Glenn Boss has been recruited for the ride.
Well, he's a great big race rider. You know, he's won the last 2 Melbourne Cups, so at 2 miles, so he's more than adequate.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
It came as no surprise to long-time customer Bradley Wilson that the Newcastle Permanent was placed second in the Building Society of the Year category. He'd tried all the big banks and switched over for the customer service.
I've been banking personally with the Permanent for 20 years, and again I think it was the convenience of service. So we have 6-day a week. It was convenient to do banking on Saturdays.
Money Magazine's Finance Awards were released today. They analysed 370 separate financial institutions across Australia and 400 different products.
Just who is the best bank, who is the best credit union and best building society and why? And what are the products that actually got them there?
The Newcastle Perm's residential home loan products scored well, so well in fact it also secured second in Home Loan Lender of the Year.
It's very nice as a regional financial institution to be recognised in this way. And of course I think it shows people that you don't need to operate out of major capital cities in order to be very good at what you do.
In the Building Society category, the Perm placed second, the Greater Building Society came in fourth and Maitland Mutual sixth. Quite an achievement for the Hunter.
No, not surprised at all. I think we probably should have been higher.
Mark Sargent's departure is the latest in a very long list of dramas for the Knights. He's remained relatively silent since tendering his resignation on Tuesday, but today on Newcastle Radio's KOFM, Sargent explained his frustration at the Knights' lack of resources compared to rival NRL clubs. Sargent and coach Michael Hagan were hauled before the Knights board this week for criticising the club's player facilities. It saw a rift between Sargent and the Knights CEO Ken Conway reach a head.
He seemed to have taken offence at something that he alleges I said at the board meeting on Monday night, which I didn't say.
The Knights CEO said the club was in regular contact with the NRL but did not need to be rescued financially. He also made a guarantee the club would not fold and leave players unpaid.
We're extremely confident the players will be paid on time and full, and our creditors will be paid on time and in full. And all of those payments are up to date at the moment.
Sargent's resignation has prompted a major reshuffle in personnel, which includes the appointment of injured back Mark Hughes to a media management role. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
For author Lorene Kelly, this is nothing short of a crusade. The Tasmanian-based writer chose Maitland to launch Still Waving, the final instalment in a trilogy about two young siblings grappling with their shocking past.
I follow them for 2 years of their life as they go through the absolute tragedy and then heal, and the healing process for them.
Lorene tapping into her personal experience to tell their story. The book is aimed at teenagers and, despite its confronting theme, carries a message of hope.
I've moved on from being a child of domestic violence to moving on and working within the area, and I think that's where it is for me, that it's got to be out there and spoken about, talked about.
Between 1 and 3 and 1 and 5, we all experience violence, and then you've got all the children that are in those homes as well that are experiencing the violence.
The message is starting to spread. Lorene's books today donated to school students in Maitland and Lake Macquarie. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
Merewether High was the last Newcastle school to win the CHS Open Boys soccer title, but that was before some of today's players were even born. Down 1-0 at half-time, Merewether's chances of glory in 2005 greatly improved when Chad Bennett broke through. It wasn't attractive, but the boys in blue weren't concerned. Having never won an Open CHS soccer title, Katara High had just as much, if not more, to play for. The 1-1 deadlock held until the final 2 minutes when a glance from Adam Preble handed Katara the match. Katara will now meet a Sydney school in the round of final 16. And what an afternoon it was for the young lads from the Talara Primary School Aussie Rules side. The regional final of the Port Kelly Cup was played at Newcastle's number 1 oval. Superb marking and converting from the Talara boys saw them defeat Swansea 23-10 to be crowned Hunter champions and progress to the state finals in Sydney later this month. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
It's a motorbike. No, it's a scooter, but hang on, aren't they pedals? Yes, this is a bicycle, an electric one. The RTA calls them original mopeds, battery-operated bikes whose power can be supplemented by pedalling, and they're becoming a familiar sight on our streets. In the last week, one Newcastle company sold 40 of these beauties at around $1,200 a pop. There are already orders for another 42.
It started off very small, but all of a sudden it's mushroomed into a huge demand, and people are coming up with all new ways to use them and reasons to use them. I've now got people buying them for mum, dad and a couple of teenage children.
Because they've got pedals, they're still classified as bicycles, so they don't need to be registered or insured, can be ridden on the road without a licence, and only require a regular bike helmet for safety.
They're basically cheaper than buying a Vespa, and they don't cost you anything to run really, and they're cute.
But for all the pluses, there are a couple of negatives. Like any bicycle, they're only good in fine weather and there's not too much room for luggage. Getting them up the hill isn't that easy either, but on the flat they cruise it up to 30 k's an hour. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Across much of the region, Rural Lands Protection Board rangers like Graham Hicks are heading bush and digging in for the annual battle to reduce the number of foxes and wild dogs. Today, an unpoisoned sample, or what's called a free feed, was put in place for a test ahead of a campaign focused on both public lands and some private properties between Tomago and the Tomaree Peninsula.
What animals are actually coming to the mound, and if we happen to notice any non-target animal footprints, we would reject using that mound for the program.
Volumes of research conducted by the University of Newcastle provide the scientific basis for the Port Stephens Feral Animal Management Committee to conduct the wild dog poisoning program.
It's targeting areas where we know that there's problems.
Its real aim is to ensure the area's native fauna is protected from predators.
Research has shown that dogs and foxes in the Port Stephens area do attack the native animals such as koalas and bandicoots, squirrel gliders, wallabies, kangaroos, a whole range of other native animals.
And the location of the baits laced with 1080 poison will be signposted during the 5-week campaign.
They're located at all entrances to the properties that are baited, and on top of that, it's an obligation of owners of lands, whether it be public or private, to notify all their neighbours.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
It's prestige harbourside real estate, currently occupied by no more than an empty wharf shed and a construction site office. But within 2 years and more than $50 million later, this key honeysuckle site will look more like this. Stage 3 of the Lee Wharf precinct includes a glass pavilion to house cafes and shops and 2 7-storey residential commercial buildings. Most importantly, though, there'll be plenty for the public, with a wide pedestrian promenade, playground and community space.
And I measured it myself, and it'll be about 6,500 square metres, and it compares to Wheeler Place over near the Civic Theatre at 2,500 square metres, so it's almost 3 times as big as Wheeler Place.
The historic Lee Wharf Sea Railway shed will be upgraded and possibly transformed into yet another upmarket restaurant in the area, but developer Keith Stronach denies suggestions there could be a glut of eateries.
I think this precinct, because it faces north, it's on the water, in a great location, it's going to be very popular.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Those at the front line say the loss of life in house fires is not only saddening, but in most cases is preventable.
It's a tragedy for the whole community in New South Wales, and the emergency service workers as well. It really weighs heavily on them.
They're 100% preventable, and that's what the message the fire brigade put out and KidSafe put out about having a fire escape plan, about what you do at the beginning of winter to check your house.
The Fire Brigade today honoured Carey Bay woman Eugenia Bussells, who acted quickly when she discovered her neighbour's house was alight recently.
Straight away reported it to AAA, which is the best thing anyone could do, then went down to a neighbour's place and tried to raise the alarm. Her neighbours weren't in place, which is great, but she bashed away, raising an alarm to make sure they get out safely.
KidSafe Hunter, which is planning to build a child safety education centre in Newcastle, says parents have a big responsibility.
I think you've got to make a very informed choice about leaving your children and who you leave them with and for how long you're going to be gone.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Although the Newcastle Knights may have survived 18 years without the backing of a licensed club, it's come at a cost. Lacking the type of resources commonplace elsewhere in the NRL, once again, the club finds itself in financial trouble.
The days of just signing cheques for a good rosy feeling and feel-good thing, well, they're certainly over. Sponsors can't do that anymore.
Instead, millionaire businessman Jeff McCloy wants a long-term solution and believes key businesses, headed by West's leagues, would solve things for good, and he's willing to assist.
I think a collective thing of good business minds to help solve the problem.
Just how big a financial hole the club is in remains unclear, but Chairman Michael Tyler assured players today payments will be met.
There are any number of issues that the players had concerns. I think many of those concerns, based on the representations made today, have been allayed, and we look forward to getting an update in the coming weeks from the Knights administration as to the progress of the restructure.
As for a merger with Wests,
I would like very much for West to come on board, but that's not definite at this point in time.
The big hurdle, it seems, is finding a merger model that suits.
The plan was announced in April. Now the first tenders for the Carr government's elective surgery pilot have been issued to private hospitals in the Hunter, New England, Greater Southern and Greater Western areas. Around 190 minor elective procedures such as ear, nose and throat surgery and cataracts will be carried out in Orange, Wagga Wagga and the Hunter during the pilot stage.
We don't want people travelling long distances, so we sought expressions of interest from private hospitals and other private facilities nearby to our public hospitals.
But surgery will only go ahead if the price is right.
I've had the responses from hospitals saying, look, we have the capacity, we have the ability, and we have the surgeons, we have the staff. Now we go back to them to say, right, we want to do a tender with you, give us your best price.
While price negotiations continue, letters will be sent to patients eligible to take part in the pilot, with priority given to those who've been waiting for surgery for more than a year. The aim is to have the procedures finished by October. The pilot program will then be evaluated, and if the government considers it a success, it will be continued across other parts of New South Wales. Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
Newcastle's urban landscape continues to transform with a residential and commercial development boom. One Hunter company is reaping the rewards of the apartment explosion in particular, headed by canny businessman Craig Grant.
You've only got to look around Newcastle, the cranes, the buildings that are going up. It's a great city to be involved with, and with the growth it's helping business, certainly.
But Craig's no real estate agent or developer, he's a strata manager, setting up community and strata title management in 1998. Since 2001, the company's dollar turnover has increased almost threefold to take out the award for the Hunter's fastest growing property or building company.
We manage a number of properties around Newcastle and the outer Hunter regions, and basically we look after the books and records and the administration services of owners of those buildings.
CSTM now manages more than 400 properties, including the York and the North Wing, and its number of employees has doubled in the last year. Recruitment company Contracts Project Services took out the overall top gong, while IT company Pinpoint came in second. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It's not every day that dreams come true, but for a 9-year-old Sydney girl, that's exactly what happened when she came face to face with past and present rugby league legends in Newcastle this afternoon. Kirsty Howlett, who has a rare spinal cord condition, met Wayne Pearce, Paul Sirenen and a handful of Knights players as part of the Legends of Origin relay. The relay is making its way from Cairns to Sydney, visiting 123 towns and raising money for the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
If Trent Barrett's injury caused a stir at state level, you can only imagine the impact of Andrew John's call-up had at Newcastle. The irony not lost on coach Michael Hagan, who loses his skipper for tomorrow night's game against the Eels and then has to come up with a game plan to contain him in Origin Game 2.
It's been a fairly strange turn of events, I'd have to say, in the last little while. But yeah, I think it just adds to the whole occasion next Wednesday as well.
The new number 7 is Dane Campbell, who's filled in before and will partner Jared Mullen in the halves. But if they look young, it's similar across the board. As expected, Matt Gidley has been ruled out, forcing Brad Tye to come into the centres. But like the others, top grade is now familiar territory.
A little bit light on, but that's just the situation we're in.
With Johns and Danny Medeiros in Origin camp and other experienced players unavailable, the captaincy is to be assumed by Craig Smith.
I mean, he's been in great form for the most of the year, and he leads from the front, so I think he'll do a great job, and I guess Clint Newton will support him, given that Craig won't be on the field all the time. So,
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Known for their thrills and spills, the Formula One superboats will race this Sunday on the harbour as part of the National Series. Among the superboat pilots who'll be trying out the new course on the western side of the harbour is Port Macquarie's Michael Page.
Back in this back channel will be a good fast track, and it's a bit more sheltered, and you don't have the swell coming through the head, and the shipping movements are probably down as well, so it'll be a good driver's course, very fast I believe.
The boats reach speeds of up to 220 kilometres an hour. And they accelerate from 0 to 100 in about 3.5 seconds. So what you'll see is 15 of those Formula One boats all racing for the first turn.
The weekend program also features Formula 2 boats, monohulls and Thundercats, with practice from 11 o'clock tomorrow and racing from 10:30 on Sunday.
It's just the sheer speed and the brutality of them, how fast they respond to the throttle and turning, and obviously you can lose control pretty quick too, and if that happens, sometimes you wake up in the water and you're like, hello, what's happened here?
She's been there since day one of the National Netball League and at the age of 28 is a veteran of the sport. A win at home would round out what's been a memorable 9 years for Alison Tucker, who'll rack up a century of games when the Jaegers host the Melbourne Kestrels tonight.
I'd like to play well, obviously, for my 100th, but I'd also like to play well, to play, in front of a good Newcastle crowd and actually win.
Despite losing a play to illness, the Jaegers have a top 4 spot in their sights and believe their mental game could prove the difference.
We just have lapses for 2 or 3 minutes of a quarter, and against some of those top teams, that's 6-7 goals in those 3-minute spaces.
3 games tonight to start the long weekend round of Newcastle Rugby League, with Lakes facing the daunting trip up the coalfields to play ladder leaders Cessnock. There are 2 games also on Sunday. Newcastle and Hunter Rugby are using the long weekend to complete some deferred matches from round 6, while the NBN Soccer League round is spread across the entire weekend, with action tonight at Hamilton before it rounds out with Broadmeadow hosting Highfields on Monday. Colleen West, NBN News.
Well, there's a lot to talk about this week. Massive news of Trent Barrett pulling out yesterday from Origin 2 with a torn quadricep. It was big news and it travelled fast. Joey Johns received a phone call from New South Wales coach Ricky Stewart about 3 p.m. yesterday afternoon. Today he'll join the team in camp in Sydney for his first training session, and it's bound to be a Joey circus. The media will swamp him. Now, on the back of that last week, the drama and hype over Johns and Kamali and who should get the halfback role, Joey is really in the spotlight. It's potentially a do or die game for the Blues, and he'll go in with no preparation, but Ricky Stewart didn't have any hesitation, but I'm sure Michael Hagan does. Now Hagan will be feeling the two-pronged barb of Joey's return, one being his Queensland team will have to contend with him on Wednesday night, and on the home front the Knights will be risking him to injury. But it's all part of the build-up and the spectacle that Origin is, and there's only 5 days to go, can't wait. Also this week the Knights story seemingly goes from bad to worse, still unable to win a game this year. This Tuesday, the resignation of football manager Mark Sargent, now more rumours on financial situation and privatisation of the club. The Knights are going through an unprecedented tough time, but there can be no excuses. And while the club is moving quickly on the bigger picture for future stability and success, the players can only have one thing on their mind, and that's their efforts on the footy field. But without a doubt, from my mind, there's one group that's been holding the Knights up by sheer willpower, and that's our amazing supporters. Thanks very much, guys, and I hope you keep up the great work. My tips for round 14, Sharks tonight, Broncos, Knights and Seagulls tomorrow, and Storm and Dragons on Sunday. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.